name's Josh Ogle, aka the Hipster Engineer, and I'm super excited to be going through these Q&A questions. We're going to cover a couple different ones. The first one that we have comes from Najib, and their question is, hello, I was curious as if the FE exams scheduled for this summer are still planned. Thank you. Well, Najib, from my understanding, those FE exams are still a go. Since they are computer-based, though, there may be some local restrictions depending on the different testing centers that you go to. So I might suggest, as you're scheduling it, give that testing center a call, look online, see what kind of hours they have. They might have different rules and regulations during this time just because it is COVID-19 and there's some extra safety precautions that people are taking. So again, the FE is still happening. It just might depend in your certain area of certain days of the week, hours, and things like that. The next question goes along with that, comes from Ciliana. What is the process to take the FE now with coronavirus? Are they suspended? What tips do you give to someone who already took the exam, didn't pass, and it's getting hard and having lack of motivation to go back to study and take it again? First off, I empathize with you so much. I understand what it's like to take an exam and not pass it and try to go take it again. But part of that first question that you had about whether or not they are suspended, again, due to the coronavirus, there may be some interesting regulations that you have to jump through, but that may vary from locality to locality. So be sure to just check in with your testing center there. As far as already taking the exam and not passing it, how do you get motivation to do it again? I think you kind of just have to realize, is this something that I want to do to further myself in my career? If that is a yes, if this is something that you want to do to further yourself, then it's an easy answer. It might be hard at first. You just have to do it and continue to study and just get after it. After I didn't pass the SE exam, I took a little bit of time to relax and kind of reflect a little bit before jumping back into it. And so it's totally okay to do something like that. Take some time off, kind of figure out where you're at and figure out where the next steps are. But definitely find ways to get back in the saddle, to start going through practice problems. Sometimes it's hard if you're doing it alone. And so that's where PPI's classes come in handy, where you have a group of individuals that are going after the same goal. They're trying to take and pass the FE, the PE, the SE exams, and you can work together. Or if you have a person that you know that's taking it around the same time close by, you can connect virtually with them and become a study buddy with them. So that's what I would recommend as far as getting that motivation. Tips for getting ready for the FE exam. I think one thing that I would say, main thing that I try to push is practice, practice, practice. The more practice problems that you do, the more that you have under your belt, the more problems that you're exposing yourself to, the better off that you're going to be during the exam. Here's the thing with the FE exam, you're going in there, the exam is electronic, the reference manual is electronic, and so you basically don't have anything going in there, so you can't prep by tabbing or highlighting books. So the main thing for the FE exam is to practice, practice, practice. Let's go ahead and look at another one, shall we? Okay, so this next question is coming from Rami. They say, hello, I'm preparing for the FE exam and I want to know if I have to memorize formulas in every chapter of the FE electrical and computer review manual. If yes, what is the best way to memorize them? Looking forward to hearing from you. So this is a great question. And the answer is simple. No, you do not have to memorize equations or formulas or anything like that. With the FE exam, you are going to be doing it on the computer where you have your questions on your screen, but you also have the reference manual on your screen as well. So you can get the reference manual for free online on NCSS's website. You can also buy a hard copy version of that through NCSS or even through PPI or Amazon. Whatever is the easiest way for you to buy that. Get it, start getting familiar with it, start understanding where things are located. If it were me and I were taking the computer-based exam, I would just get the PDF of it, because then you're used to searching the PDF similar to what would be happening during the exam, right? Because you're going to have an electronic version, so you're going to get familiar with, okay, I just saw this equation, so in a couple scrolls of the mouse wheel, I'm going to find this equation, and that's the thing that I'm looking for. So that is the most memorizing that I would do, is just getting familiar with that NCSS FE reference manual. Along with reviewing the reference manual, another question coming into us from Abraham asked, how do I prioritize how much time I should dedicate to each section of the FE exam? I want to take the mechanical discipline and don't feel very versed in some of the math portions, i.e. differential equations, linear algebra, etc. So the first thing that I would recommend is going to NCSS's website, finding your discipline, and looking through the different topics that are listed for your exam. The reason that this is important is because then you can see how many problems, or at least a percentage or a range of problems that you will have of that nature on the FE exam, which are going to be more heavily tested. There may be problems where it might not be worth your time to study for. You have to realize that every single problem on the FE exam is worth the same. And if you use that to your advantage, you can focus on the things that you do best and get points where you can. Now, I will admit, during the FE exam when I took it, there was definitely some classes that I had not taken, but I had kind of brushed up on a few things, but there was also some topics that I completely said, okay, if I get this topic, I'm going to completely just avoid it or guess. For me, big disclaimer, for me, those topics were thermodynamics and circuits. I had not taken classes in those, and I didn't even bother to brush up on those, because when I looked at the breakdown of the different topics that were on the exam, I noticed that those were a small percentage of the questions, and so if I focused on everything else, I felt like I was going to be okay. You don't have to get 100% on this exam to pass it. It's obviously better for you to answer correctly more problems, but you don't have to be perfect. So focusing on the areas that you know and understand in order to get answers and get points in that respect is the most beneficial thing that you can do on the exam. And I realize that doesn't really answer your question of how much time should you dedicate to each section of the FE exam. That kind of varies from person to person. Somebody might understand the math portion of the exam, but might struggle on the statics or dynamics type questions that you might see on the exam, obviously depending on what discipline that you're taking. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer for this. I think you have to spend some time looking at the breakdown and seeing, okay, I have 2 months or I have 4 months to study I have these topics. You can proportion your time based on the percentage. You can proportion your time based on your understanding of it. There's a couple different ways that you can break down your time, and that varies from person to person. Again, as a disclaimer, I don't want anybody to go in the FE exam thinking to themselves, Josh said I can skip an entire section and I am going to pass the exam. I'm not saying that. If you were to answer every question correctly and you skipped a section and you missed 8 problems, there's a good chance that you still might pass the exam. However, the likelihood of that happening are very slim. So again, disclaimer, I'm not telling you to skip certain sections on the exam or during your studies, but if you look and see, there might only be a handful of differential equation problems on the exam. So you have to see how heavily are these weighted and how important is it for me to deep dive into these topics. Okay, so check out the NCSS guidelines for your specific discipline and see what that breakdown is, and then decide how much time you're going to spend from there. Okay, cool. Let's take a look at another one, shall we? So the next one comes from Gregory. Gregory says, hello, I'm getting ready to take the FE exam, the mechanical version, and I was wondering if there is any material I should focus on. There's a lot of material to go over, also to see if there are exam samples online to take or other ways to see where I stand before the exam. So, kind of going back to my previous answer, I'll recap it really quick. Go to NCSS, find your specific exam discipline, and look at the breakdown that has the different topics that you're going to be tested on. And from there, you'll know, okay, I struggle in this area, I'm going to focus here. Oh, I'm confident in this area, but I want to make sure I don't miss any easy points, so I'm still going to focus a little here. But you might weigh some of those topics differently depending on your confidence level. That's the gist of how should you focus on the different topics for the FE exam. Your second part of your question regarding exam samples and other ways to see where you stand before the exam, I highly recommend one of two things. Number one, get NCSS's practice exam. Okay, this is going to be the most realistic FE exam practice test that you're going to have across the board. You don't know why? It's because NCSS writes the exam and they also put together this practice exam. Okay, so that's the first thing that I would recommend, whether you can find it electronically or if you buy a hard copy. Get the NCSS practice exam, sit down, create a lifelike scenario, take a Saturday and spend it just as you would in the testing center. Have the FE practice exam open, maybe on your computer you have a PDF version of the reference manual, and simulate what it would be like in the exam setting. So that's the first thing I would recommend. A close second would be find a practice FE exam from a third party. A third party meaning PPI, or there's other exam prep courses out there that have different practice exam books that you can use to help you understand, okay, where do I stand before test day? First and foremost, I would go to NCSS for that. The second place I would go would be PPI. The third place I would go would be one of these other exam prep courses that are online. They might have a hard copy or electronic version of this. Okay, I might be a little bit biased because I teach for PPI right now, but I also used PPI's reference manuals, practice exams, this, that, and the other as I was preparing for my FE, PE, and SE exam. So I've experienced all of the different materials, or the majority of the materials, and they have helped me, and so that's why I recommend them as the second one, only behind the creators of the exam, NCWS. Oh look, we got another one. Let's check this one out, coming from Isaiah. Isaiah says, "Hi Josh, I hope you are well. Do you have any advice for finding a study partner for the Civil FE exam? Unless I already know someone who is studying for the same exam, it seems my only two options are studying by myself and studying in a class. I'm hoping for consistent small group study sessions, but not sure where to find that. I look forward to your response. Thank you." You know, that's a great question. How do you find a study partner? Unless you do know somebody, sometimes it might be a little bit hard. And that is where the classes come into play, in my opinion, because you have a group of 40, 50, 60 individuals that are studying together. You're going through problems together, you're going through lecture together, and you're really diving deep into these different problems, these different topics, and you're trying to understand it together, and you're learning and growing together. So that would be one option. Another option would be to find different groups on Facebook. I know that there are different FE exam groups. Now, I haven't dabbled too much in there, other than I know that they are there. You could search there, you could search Reddit, you could search engineeringboards.com. Usually there's some way to find others that are taking the exam at the same time. This next one is coming from Santa. They ask, "Can you share some study tips for the FE exam? What is an advice that you would give to a recent, soon-to-be graduate regarding graduate school or jobs?" Okay, so we got two questions in there. First one is, what are some study tips for the FE exam? First off, you're going to want to get your materials. Start gathering those now, whether you're purchasing things from NCWS, from PPI, or from Amazon. There's a lot of different resources out there that you can get. The second thing that I would do would be start to familiarize yourself with the materials that you have. Start familiarizing yourself with the electronic PDF of the FE handbook from NCWS. Start understanding where things are located so you can quickly access those while you're taking the exam. The next thing would be, whether it's with a reference manual or old textbooks or notes from class, just start refreshing and getting familiar with these different topics that pertain to the FE exam. Start kind of skimming through that, starting working problems, working through example problems, practice problems, whatever it may be. The key is to just practice. Get exposed to all sorts of different problems, questions that you might see on the exam. The more exposure that you have to different topics, the better off that you'll be. You'll be able to look at a problem and say to yourself, "Oh, I saw something similar to this, and this is what I did." Your ability to recall during the exam is going to be heightened because you exposed yourself to so many different types of problems, types of topics. And so that is the most important thing that you can do as you prepare for the FE exam. The other tip that I have for the FE exam would be what you're doing the day or two before. You're leading up to the FE exam by studying for a month or two or whatever duration it is. I can guarantee you that the studying that you do one day before the exam, if you've already put in the work 2 months ahead of time, 4 months ahead of time, that one day right before the exam is not going to add to your overall performance. And so what I recommend to the students that I teach with PPI is take 1 day, maybe 2 days off from work and don't study Find something fun to do. Go hiking, go biking, watch a movie, relax, whatever it is. Let your brain rest a little bit. So that was your first question. The second question that you had was about what advice would I give to recent or soon to be graduates regarding graduate school or jobs. So I am a fan of graduate school. My personal opinion is that when I went to my undergrad, I didn't get exposed to enough to really become good or an expert in the field of structural engineering. I had only taken 3, maybe 4 classes in structural engineering, but that wasn't enough. So I went on to graduate school. Now, graduate school isn't for everybody yet. You kind of have to evaluate your circumstances and figure out whether or not it's right for you. Graduate school is something that will benefit you in your career. However, in some disciplines, it is not always necessary in order to get ahead and continue to move forward in your career. But I cannot deny the fact that it is beneficial regardless. You just have to figure out if it's right for you. And you can reach out to people in your industry, whether you have connections or not, and ask them about that. I remember when I was considering graduate school, I actually was in Utah going to school, and I was calling out to engineering firms out in California because that's where I wanted to end up for a little bit. And I asked them about graduate school. I just cold called a firm and said, hey, can I talk to so-and-so, because I saw that they were a high-level principal, and as luck would have it, I was able to talk to that person. I said, hey, you don't know me. This is not a project-related question. This is just a random question. I'm some Joe Schmo off the street, and I want to know, what do you think about graduate school for your engineers? What do you think about this program at this school? By reaching out, you're doing 2 things. Number 1, you're creating a connection. You're creating this connection with somebody that you wouldn't otherwise have. And number 2, you're getting advice from somebody who is living and breathing engineering in your industry. Say graduate school isn't something that you decide that you want to do, you can call back that person and say, hey, can I stop by and we can chat for a little bit? Or can we go grab lunch? Or with COVID-19 right now, it might be, hey, can we jump on a video chat? I'd love to talk to you about your company and tell you what I've been up to and what I can do for your company. So that's what I would do if you're considering graduate school, because it kind of hits 2 things. It hits graduate school, and who knows, maybe you could find an opportunity for an internship. If you're just graduating right now, looking for a job, don't give up. There are firms out there that are hiring. They are being a little bit cautious. I've talked to a couple different firms, and some have said that they're being cautious. They're trying to see where things are going. Other firms are saying, hey, if we find the right fit for our company, we're going to hire that person and we're going to find work for them. Okay, we have one last question. This question comes from Jason. Jason says, I graduated and went straight into teaching for 10 years in Japan. For the last year, I've been studying to pass the FE, hopefully soon. As a stepping stone, I plan on returning to the States once I pass. Being the equivalent of an entry-level civil engineer, any tips for finding and landing a job? Ideally, I would like to use my Japanese skills acquired here, but I haven't seen many jobs that would incorporate such in civil engineering. Any recommendations for companies that work with Japanese partners or have branches in the U.S.? I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know any companies that have Japanese ties here in the U.S. However, you could do a search on Google to look for companies that have an office in Japan as well as offices in the U.S. I feel like that's probably the only way that you can get that mixture that you're looking for of civil engineering and also being able to use your Japanese skills. Now, when you're reaching out to these different engineering firms as you're looking to make the transition, one thing that I would recommend is play to your strengths. You said that you've been teaching for 10 or so years. You're about to take the FE exam. What are things that you've learned from teaching that would apply to the actual engineering profession that you're interested in? Try to find some good correlations between those two worlds rather than focusing on, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done this. Focus on, I've done this, I did research on this, I did a project on this, I taught people how to do this, and I want to help your company to do this, or I want to implement a training protocol like this for your company because of my expertise in teaching. Whatever it may be that you feel is that overlap between teaching and practice, find out what that is and capitalize on that. Figure out how you make that your strength as opposed to making that your weakness. So that is it for the session of Q&A of questions as they relate to the FE exam. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have any other time. Reach out to me, go to my website, thehipsterengineer.com, and help me find ways that I can help you as you're preparing for your different exams or you're preparing for anything else in your career. I'm more than happy to help. Just reach out to me or visit my website to contact me. Until next time, I'm Josh Ogle, aka The Hipster Engineer.